So many Americans are suffering with conditions like paralysis and think it's permanent. Well, Hailey is here today to talk about her son whose story changed and he no longer has this condition. So his name's Avery. When he was 8 years old, he had a virus, and after that virus developed an autoimmune condition that rendered him paralyzed. And so the family brought him to all these hospitals, high level doctors. They all said it was permanent and there was no reversing it. So they started to think, oh my goodness, where is he going to be in his life? This totally changed his life path. Couldn't do all the things he wanted to do. And all of a sudden, they're thinking about a lifelong condition that's not going to go away. And so luckily they heard about us. They brought him over to us. We were able to find hidden neurological weaknesses and we fixed him. And so Hailey's here today to share the full story from start to finish of Avery's journey and the family's journey throughout the process. I'm so excited to have her here. So the question you're probably asking yourself right now is, how do I fit into this conversation? Well, that's why I'm here. I'm here to teach you about the body and how it works. And if you're somebody with this type of condition, we're going to have references, resources for you at the bottom that you'll be able to see and click on. That'll be able to help you. We got Hailey Bulliard with us today, and I'm so excited that you're here to talk about your son and the whole progress of a scenario that happened that was just, I can't even imagine what you and your family went through. Your husband, you have 3 children. He's your youngest child. You're from the Breaux Bridge area, right? Is it?
St. Martinville.
St. Martinville area, Louisiana, for everybody watching that maybe from out of the state. And just, so you had this 8-year-old, your youngest son, and what really started the whole process? When did you start to think something was wrong with him, where things were not right? Something you knew in your gut that just something wasn't right with your child.
So I think back in 2021 when he was in first grade, he was 6 or 7, and he came home pretty much every day after school, complaining of a headache. So, and he just seemed really off. He would sleep all the way home. He constantly had a headache. So, of course, I met with his teacher, and we had his vision checked, and everything was fine. But he seemed tired all the time. He was suffering with a lot of sinus infections at the time, throat infections. I take him to the pediatrician or the urgent care, and they would check like his lymph nodes. They were always swollen, but he always tested negative for everything, tested negative for strep. They just never could really give me answers. And then it led to him not sleeping at night. He had a ton of anxiety. He wouldn't sleep. He would have a lot of trouble falling asleep. He would cry because he couldn't sleep because he was tired. So then the next morning to go to school was awful. He was so exhausted. He stayed with almost like a chapped area around his mouth because he had trouble breathing.
How old was he back then?
He had just turned 7.
7.
Sorry, he was, 6 or 7.
6 or 7.
In first grade.
Did your other 2 children have anything like this, or?
They had sinus issues like allergies, but nothing to the point where they couldn't sleep at night.
Wow.
But his, by far, was the worst compared to the other 2. He just constantly stayed sick. And so I ended up asking the pediatrician to refer us to an ENT just because he would have trouble breathing. And so we ended up in November of 21, I think it was 22. It's been a while.
Yeah.
He ended up having sinus surgery because we were told that was pretty much like the last option that we had. He had been on a ton of sinus medications, daily medications. At that point, he was having a ton of anxiety. So he had a sinus surgery in November of 22. And it was horrible. It was a pretty major surgery. I even asked the ENT, like, are you sure he could handle this? Because it was a pretty big surgery. He advised us to remove his tonsils. Also, he did, like, coming out of the surgery, he didn't do well at all. He had trouble breathing. They had to give him breathing treatments. His recovery was horrible. He didn't eat for over almost 2 weeks.
Oh, my goodness.
He was on a lot of pain medication, and that's where his behavior, like,
So he was on pain medication at that age?
Yeah.
Wow.
He was on high set. And so looking back, like, I didn't know what I know now. Like, it was a lot. We ended up, through all of this, found out he had one kidney. I didn't know at the time. So he was also on a lot of medication that he probably shouldn't have taken. And so his recovery was horrible.
That was around when he was 7?
Had just turned 7, or it was November, right? He turned 7 November 24th.
Wow.
And he had the surgery the first week of November.
Wow. So the progression, I guess at that point you knew there's some things going on. I mean, that maybe you're not going away. I mean, you obviously had the surgery looking for some results.
Yeah.
And you're saying that it almost got worse
Yes,
after the surgery.
it definitely got worse. His anxiety was horrible. He didn't want to go anywhere. He didn't want to go to school. He didn't sleep. And sleep, we learned through this journey that sleep is so important to him. And now that I've kind of put the pieces together, looking back when he was 2-3 years old, he was a different kid if he didn't sleep, or if he didn't sleep enough.
Sure. Sleep is when you heal.
Sleep, like his body, even to this day, he requires a lot of sleep. So that kind of, just him not being able to breathe well and having severe anxiety and not sleeping was a whole issue for him even before the surgery. But then after the surgery, it didn't help. It actually made it worse because his anxiety escalated so much. And it was just pitiful because I didn't know how to help him. He had, after the surgery, to me, he had more trouble, like harder trouble breathing. He stayed with a rash around his mouth where his skin would peel. So he didn't want to go places because he didn't want people to see him like that. Jeez.
It must have just, how did that affect your family? I mean, your day-to-day routines?
It was really hard. He was, and I think looking back at pictures now, he looked really sick. Like, I didn't realize it in the moment, but looking back, he stayed with dark circles under his eyes. He looked pale. He just looked very sickly. And I didn't notice it in the moment, but his behavior, it was like he was just basically trying to survive day to day. He had like screaming fits, tantrums. He didn't want anyone to look at him.
And then
it was hard. It was very hard for our kids, our other 2 kids, to see him.
Okay, so there was obviously a progression of sicknesses, of things you knew were not right with your 8-year-old. Well, he turned into 8. But when did you really see something that was serious? Like when you knew something, instead of just being like things that maybe you thought were he could grow out of, like some parents would say, right? If you do the right things. But there was a point, it had to be a point where you were like, this is some serious stuff that I got to get care. When was that point?
I think it was probably about 3 weeks after his surgery. At that point, I was like, okay, he had the surgery, he should be better, and he was actually worse. And so he was put on, I ended up bringing him back to his pediatrician because he was actually declining from the surgery. He was still blowing a ton of green stuff from the surgery. He was staying with a rash around his face. He had tantrums that it was hard for my kids to see because he had like almost like, I would kind of describe it as like, in a way, it seemed kind of like epilepsy, but when when people have seizures, it lasts a few seconds to a minute. His would last like 20 to 30 minutes, where it's like he didn't know where he was. He wasn't the same kid. He couldn't like snap out of it. And the pediatrician kept saying, "Oh, it's just anxiety. We need to put him on an anxiety medication." And he ended up having staph after the surgery. So that pretty much kind of is where like all the red flags started coming to me, and I was like, he's supposed to be better. We did this surgery. He's actually worse. He was having these major fits and meltdowns. So it's like at some points we didn't even really leave the house because things would set him off, and he was never that type of kid. He was the kid who was driving a four-wheeler, playing outside, going to the cousins' houses. He loved school. At this point, he hated school. He didn't want to go to school. And I think it had a lot to do with he was just trying to survive every day. And he was 7, so he didn't know how to explain. Like, I would try to talk to him, and he couldn't explain how he was feeling. He was just annoyed all the time. And so at that point, when he ended up having staph, he was put on a medication. And 10 days after he started Bactrim, he started complaining of like fuzzy. He would tell me his eyes were fuzzy and blurry. And at that point, I knew it wasn't his vision because we had already checked his eyes a few months before. And so I started reading the paperwork on the medication, and that was a side effect of it. So I stopped the medication, and he continued to he was missing a lot of school because he was sick. So that was another stressful part of, something he was going through. And then Christmas Eve, Christmas night, our family gets together, and we have a really big family, and he was very tense, and he didn't leave my side that night, and he kept insisting that we go home early, which is not like him. And so that night, his anxiety was like through the roof. He was just that was probably the worst night. Like we just couldn't, he was just very different. Well, it ended up being that night he woke up with, ended up waking up that night, and he had hives all over his body from head to toe. And he wouldn't stop scratching. He was crying because he just didn't feel good. So that was kind of the start of everything. And then the next day I took him back to the pediatrician, and I just kept insisting that he either run tests or like help us to figure out what was wrong, because he was a completely different kid. And I just never really got answers. He told me it wasn't I asked him if it was an allergic reaction to the Bactrim or the anxiety medication, and he kept insisting that it wasn't, just to give him a cortisone cream. But it was, at this point, it was covering his entire body. So he had that for about a week. So that's kind of like the point where I knew like something was just very different.
And then from that point forward, when did it go to where he wasn't mobile anymore, where he couldn't walk?
So he had Christmas night is when the hives came out, and it lasted about a week. We just did cortisone cream and tried a veno bath, like just trying to help him tolerate his body itched everywhere. And so January 7th, he came with us to the daycare that we owned, and he helped us move and clean things in the classrooms, and he was fine all day. He helped. He's a kid who helps build things. He's just a little helper, and he worked all day with us. And that evening, I told him it was time to bathe, and he told me he couldn't walk because his legs hurt. And I thought he's the baby, so I thought, he's just, trying to get my attention. And so he wouldn't walk to the bathroom to go and bathe. So I ended up carrying him to the bathroom, just thinking he's tired, he's exhausted from the day. At this point, the hives were completely gone. He didn't have any hives. He just complained of being sore and tired. He was really, really tired. And so that evening, I had to even help bathe him, which, looking back, he's very independent. So that was kind of odd. That evening, my husband was at the camp, so he slept in the room with me because he just said he didn't feel good. He didn't feel right, is how he would say it. And so the next morning, we got dressed to go to church, and he wouldn't get out the bed. I tried to have him stand up. He couldn't stand. At that point, he started having pain to just like touch his lower extremities. I could press on them, but like I couldn't like lift his leg. He would start crying in pain. It was like night and day. He was fine the afternoon before, and he wakes up and cannot walk.
Wow. I can't even, as a parent, my wife and I have 3 kids, and I can't even imagine the pain that you felt from seeing and witnessing that. And from that moment, like, how bad did things get? He just, when did the wheelchair happen?
So that morning, it was it was January 8th. It was my oldest son's birthday, so I always kind of remember that date. But my husband got home from the camp, and we had to dress him and carry him to the car. And I remember walking into church that morning, Drew put him on his back and like carried him into church on his back. And Avery is the type of kid, out of all three kids, he doesn't like any attention on him. So it was very hard for him too, because like people were like looking at us and like, he's 7, why are you carrying him? My brother-in-law works in orthopedics in surgery. And he was like, are you faking? Like, he was joking with him, like, dude, you're going to start walking? Like, your dad can't carry you. And I remember after Mass, he even, like, checked him out because he works in orthopedics. And he's like, I don't see anything wrong. And I'm like, we really thought he was faking. And my oldest had transient synovitis years before, where he had a virus that attacked his knee, and then it went to his hip, and he couldn't walk for a week.
Wow.
Yeah. So I thought maybe it was something similar to that. And I was like, I'll just get him checked out Monday. Aiden had it. It's no big deal. Like, he'll start walking. So that day at my parents' house after Mass, my parents always cook lunch, and our entire family's there. And usually kids are riding four-wheelers, playing outside. Well, he couldn't do any of it. He just sat in the living room. My mom even had a computer chair that we rolled him around the house in. And in the back of my mind, I just kept saying, like, is he faking? Like, I don't understand, like, why he won't even attempt to walk. And so the next day, he had off of school, and I had work. So my mom kept him, and he did stand up for a brief few minutes. That day, he was painting with his cousins, and she sent me a picture. He was like, he stood up. But then she texted me right back. She was like, never mind, he can't stand. And he was back in the chair. So that was about, that went on for like 3 days. I just kind of kept waiting. I was like, this can't be real life. Like, he's gonna get up and start walking, It's just maybe he pulled a muscle climbing up the ladder at the daycare. I really didn't, it felt like we were in a like a dream. I was like, he's gonna start walking. And so by the 3rd day, I ended up getting an appointment with his pediatrician. And it was very, we had been seeing this pediatrician for years. So like I fully trusted him. And the first thing he thought was that I kept referring to the medication that Avery had taken after his surgery. And I kept questioning, because I had already started like kind of doing my own research on like why he had stopped walking. And I kept asking him, do you think it's the medication he was put on when he had staph? And he reassured me that it wasn't any of the medication, any of the side effects. And at that point, he thought that he possibly had rhabdomyolysis. Mm-hmm. And so he was worried about, like, if I remember correctly, it's like your body's completely dehydrated. A lot of athletes will get it, and then it'll start shutting down your organs. So he had us do blood work and sent us home and told us he had to drink. It was like a lot of fluids. And so we had to wait a day until we got the results back. And so the following day, we went back to the pediatrician, and the results were negative. So I was relieved in a way, but then I was also...
He's still not walking.
He's still not walking. And at this point, the hives were back. The hives came back all over his entire body. So we were kind of going backwards. And at that point, that's kind of where things like my view on what was happening, like, completely changed.
In what way? What do you mean?
Like, at that point, it was almost turned towards us. Like, the pediatrician started questioning us.
As a parent?
As a parent. Like, are you sure? Like, he can't walk. He even told Avery, you really need to get out the wheelchair and start walking. Your parents have work. Because at this point, we had been going back and forth to the doctor. And I remember reassuring the doctor, like, he's not faking. Like, this is a kid who drives a four-wheeler, a forklift. He drives tractors. He's not an inside boy. Like, he loves to be outside. He's not one to just want to sit in a wheelchair,
right.
And at this point, we had ended up getting a wheelchair from a local place in Lafayette, because my husband had to go back to work, and I couldn't carry him everywhere. So that was like hard for our family because now we were loading and unloading a wheelchair everywhere we went.
How much did he weigh at this point?
He was real tiny, especially after the surgery. He had lost a lot of weight because he wasn't eating. I don't know his weight exactly, but he was tiny, but he was still he was heavy to move around.
Yeah.
And I could move him like in the house. I could move him on my own, but to bring him, like if we had to walk into a store, like I couldn't carry him. He couldn't fit in a basket, So at that point, and he also had to go back to school, which was another big stress for him going back to school. So we got the wheelchair, and so my older two kids at this point are really we're just like, what's really happening, because we're loading and unloading a wheelchair. He can't, he had to wear sweatpants a lot because he couldn't stand up to pull up his clothes to use the restroom. We had to put him on, he couldn't even stand to urinate.
Oh my goodness.
At that point, we couldn't touch his legs at all. I mean, he was swelling his joints. Then it was like moving to his joints, his wrist, his knees were swelling. So at that point, the pediatrician was kind of like, at first he said it joking, but then it was several comments of, you need to get up and walk, your parents have work. So he didn't believe him? He didn't believe him at all. And that's where that's where like my view on everything completely changed. He was even questioning us, like, are you sure? Like, are y'all sure this is like, basically he was faking, is what we were kind of being told. And then it turned into, the more I would question him about things that I was researching, because I couldn't sleep. I was so stressed and trying to figure out things on my own, and just trying to figure out where to go. Because at that point, I had gotten this vibe from the pediatrician that, like,
he didn't think there was anything wrong with him.
He didn't think there was anything wrong with him.
He couldn't see anything. He couldn't find anything wrong with him.
He did like all of the tests. He would hit his knees. He couldn't touch his legs, but he tried every test. He would rub the little wooden the little thing on the bottom of his foot.
Yep.
He did all of the testing every time we went. And at this point, I was basically just showing up at his office. I didn't even make appointments because we were kind of starting to get the runaround. I think it's because he didn't know. He couldn't figure out what was wrong. And then it quickly changed to his view was that Avery had conversion disorder, which is basically like he was crazy, pretty much psychotic. Like it was an 8. Yeah, he was that he was basically crazy and that it was all in his head, and he could walk. He just didn't want to get out of the wheelchair and walk.
Jeez.
And I think for me, that appointment was where I completely lost. And I hate to say it, but I lost faith. I was like, they're blaming us. They're blaming him. He wanted to try him on another medication. And I refused. At that point, I was like, you can't tell me if Bactrim or the other medication he was on did this to him. You can't prove it. You can't tell me. He didn't even want to hear when I'd bring up the other medication. He completely ignored my thoughts on that. And so when he tried to push another medication, that's when I was like, I need to go elsewhere.
So how did you find elsewhere? What did you do?
So we ended up going to a local hospital, Women's and Children's, and he did, the pediatrician did give us a referral. So we went there, and at this point, like almost 2 weeks of him being in a wheelchair. And so we went to the hospital, and I asked them to just do a complete body scan on him. They did a CT scan. I don't think he did an MRI at that point. It was just a full, I believe it was a CT scan. And the ER, I'll never forget, the ER doctor came in and he was like, well, everything's good. Everything's clear. And I stood up and I was like, what do you mean everything's clear? Like, he's in a wheelchair and no one can give me any answers.
Wow.
And so he walked out and he came back about 20 minutes later and he said, oh, well, we did notice that he has par lumbar, like a defect on it, one of...
Pars defect.
Pars defect. Yeah. So in my mind, I was like, oh, well, that's what's wrong with him. And he said, no, he was probably just born with that. It's not going to affect him being able to not walk. And then he told us that, and just to make sure that you are aware, he does have one kidney. And we weren't aware of that. I never knew that he only had one kidney. So then that was a whole nother stressful thing for me, because for the last probably 3 years, the doctors had been putting him on different medications because he was constantly staying sick. And, you know,
You were wondering if some of that had some effect.
Had maybe affected him.
Wow.
And so they referred us to an orthopedic specialist in Lafayette, but it was like a 2-week wait to get into that appointment. And so the following day, I went back to the pediatrician's office and asked him, or no, I didn't go back to his office at that point. I was pretty much kind of done with that whole situation. So we ended up 2 days later, we drove to Texas Children. We didn't have an appointment.
It's a hospital in Texas.
A hospital in Texas. So we drove there and just kind of went in as a walk-in in emergency room.
What made you go there?
I had started researching, and it was either there or I believe the other one was in Boston.
Okay.
And so that one was a little closer for us.
What brought you there in research?
It just kept showing, like when I would look online, it was like the number one neurological, pediatric hospital.
Gotcha.
And at that point, I'll go back a second to whenever we went to women's, I believe it was like a Thursday. Well, that night he started having these, I called them like epileptic episodes. It wasn't a seizure, but the stress, looking back, his body had gone through so much stress. It was like fight or flight all the time. Mm-hmm. And he started having these like fits, I called them, at night. And it was mainly in the afternoon, but it started happening during the day too. He would, it's like he wasn't there. He would stare at us, but he wouldn't like snap out of it. He would scream and cry in pain for hours. He would throw himself. Well, at that point, he would try to get out the wheelchair, but then he couldn't move. He couldn't stand. So we'd have to like put him on the floor. He would try to like bang his head on the floor. It almost seemed like seizures, but it lasted an hour to 2 hours every time. He would physically hit us, swing at us.
Oh my
I mean, he wasn't even the same kid. He would scream and cry in pain. He would repeat the same thing. Like he would say, I want to go, I want to go, I want to go, I want to go. He would say it.
You must have been terrified.
Yeah.
I
it was very, it was hard, like trying to be compassionate for him, but also like to hold like the fear back, because I didn't want him to see, like
right.
we didn't, I didn't want, it was very, I don't know, it's even hard to explain, because he didn't even seem like he was our same child,
Yes.
And so it would last for an hour, 2 hours.
You must have been like holding it all together as a parent in front of him to kind of assure him that everything's okay. But in the big picture, you knew everything wasn't. And I can't, like, behind the scenes, you must have just been bawling your eyes out.
Oh, we would, my husband and I would take turns, like, to walk away, and so that he wouldn't see, because we were really, like, we had never been through anything like that. And thankfully, a lot of times, Drew, he missed work a lot because he physically had to help. Like, I couldn't carry him. When he would go through these, like, fits, I called them, he would literally, like, beat us up, swing at us, and Drew would have to, like, contain him until he was just so restless that he would just fall asleep after. Like, when he finally came out of it, he was exhausted, like kids, like people are when they have a seizure. Mm-hmm. They sleep for hours after. That's exactly what he would do. So when we went to women's, that I'm going to go back a second. We went that day and they did the scans. And that night was when he had like the worst fit, I called it. Well, the next day we went back to women's and I had them ask for an EEG, I believe it's called. But it showed no seizure activity. So they couldn't tell us, like, again, we're doing another test, and it's showing that he's perfectly fine.
So, again, you leave, you get frustrated with the local hospitals, doctors. So you're like, okay, I'm going to go to the best pediatric neurological hospital I can find. So you drive over to Texas, which was how far?
4 hours, 6 hours.
4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
You get there, and you're thinking, my goodness, I'm going to finally get some answers from my son, right? And so, so again, you get, you obviously get frustrated with the local doctors. Nobody's giving you answers. They're telling you that it's in his head. They're looking at scans, can't find anything wrong, and then giving you more medications, and you're just frustrated, even with the local hospitals. So then you research and you find what you think is the best pediatric neurological hospital, one of the best ones in the world, you said, outside of Boston. And so you travel 5 hours with your family over, and you're thinking, I'm going to finally get all the answers I need for my child so I can get him out of this wheelchair. So you get to this hospital, and what was your experience? What happened?
So initially when we got there, I was very hopeful because I had researched, and I was like, we're going to finally get answers, because at that point I felt like we weren't really being heard, and that he was faking still. And because I had several family members in the medical field too, that I would call them and ask questions, and they were like, he's just going to walk. And I felt like that just wasn't good enough for me, that I wasn't just going to wait and see when he would finally start walking. So when we got to Texas Children, we went through triage. We stayed in triage for a long time. And it's, looking back, it's like a learning medical hospital. So we were there probably 3 or 4 days the first time, because we ended up going back again. But the first time we were there 3 to 4 days, and we saw multiple doctors. I would say between 40 and 50 doctors.
Oh my goodness.
In and out, mainly in triage. We did see more once we got to a room. But it was very hard because he was so scared. That was probably the hardest.
He started to realize at that point, this is some big time stuff I got going on.
And what's looking back, he didn't really.
It's okay. No, it's okay. It's okay. There's tissue. Grab tissue if you need to. It's okay.
He wouldn't talk about it.
Oh goodness.
And it's like we didn't want to question him, I guess we didn't want him to feel like he was so different, because he was really the same kid, but he was in a wheelchair. And it was during COVID too, so we had to wear masks, and it was just horrible.
So you got there and you're thinking, all these doctors. I mean, honestly, as a parent, it makes me emotional. I can't even imagine. And it's so much pain that you had to go through. And I think it sounds like to me the turning point for you was when you started to see in his eyes that he was scared. Like he started to realize, I don't know if I'm ever going to pull out of this. That's what you're saying? Yeah,
and he was very skeptical, I think, just because he felt, like no one believed him. So every time they would come in, it was, one doctor or one medical student at a time. It was like a revolving door. They'd send one crew in. They would tell us what they thought. They would leave. We'd wait a couple hours. Another crew would come in.
What was the ultimate thing they gave you?
At first, they said it was serum sickness from the Bactrim medication that he was on. And what really upset me was when we were back in, so at this point we're in Texas, but when we were back in Louisiana, I had called his ENT to get his medical records because we were traveling to Houston, and we were basically told on the phone, like, if he would have just been compliant and flushed out his nose after his sinus surgery, that he wouldn't have gotten staph, and we wouldn't be in this situation. And
so it was your fault.
It was our fault again. And that he just advised that we put him back on Bactrim for another month. Wow. He wanted him to take it for another month.
So the pediatric hospital in Texas told you to...
I'm sorry, the ENT wanted us, when we were traveling to Texas, I called to get his medical records. And his ENT, the nurse said, well, the doctor wants he should be back on Bactrim for a month. It'll help his infection and it'll clear everything up.
And that's the medication you talked about earlier where he started taking it.
Yeah, and that's when he had the hives and his vision. Hives. And I was like, there's no way I'm putting him back on it for a month. So I refused to even fill it. So while we were there...
At the pediatric hospital.
At the pediatric hospital, they just kept questioning, at this point I had a calendar because everybody kept coming in and out, and I had journaled a lot.
I know you brought a bunch of notes.
Yeah, for myself, just to put the
Keep your
pieces
sanity.
together,
Yeah.
because every time we saw a new doctor, they would question it. I have to go through everything all over again. And so at that point, I had notes in my phone, notes in a journal. I had a folder with paperwork. And when they told me it was serum sickness, I said, well, his ENT just wanted him to take it again for another month. And they told me I remember they said if I would have given it to him, he probably would have, he was highly allergic to it, is what they told me, that he
So it might have
probably
killed
would
him.
have died.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was the initial diagnosis, was serum sickness. So while we were there at Texas Children, they didn't do any scans on him because they had just gotten everything from Lafayette. And we were told when we left there that it was serum sickness from the Bactrim medication, and that this was like around January 19th, 20th. It would take about 3 weeks for him to start being able to move. Now, I don't think I've shared this part, but he could not pick up his legs at all. He could barely pick up his foot off the floor. We couldn't touch him. He was gaining weight at this point. He was, from sitting in the wheelchair and not moving, and he was retaining a lot of fluid. His feet would swell. So when you would touch his feet, it was just like discolored, like his feet were like purple and white, and he just didn't look good overall. His joints are swelling on his wrist and his knees. And so at first they thought it was a type of autoimmune, but then he did so much blood work while we were there, which terrified him.
I guess so. Being stuck how many times at this point?
His thyroid levels were elevated, like all of his blood work, his protein, like everything was off, but they couldn't tell me what was wrong. And so at that point, they told us that within 3 weeks, they discharged us, and they said within 3 weeks he would be walking again. That they just, like, his body just needed to like run its course, basically. So we went back home, and he was kind of in and out of school at that point because that was really hard. That was probably just as hard because his friends are now seeing him in a wheelchair. He's wearing different clothing. He can't wear his uniform because he can't stand to use the restroom. He couldn't sit in his desk because his teacher couldn't lift him during the day to put him in a desk.
Wow.
So it was just, everything was different for him. Like, besides not being able to walk, everything changed for him. He couldn't play outside, he couldn't do any of the normal things that he had done before. So that was really, really stressful and hard for him.
So you come back to Louisiana. They don't really give you much. Say he's just going to grow out of it in 3 weeks, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
And then they scheduled a follow-up?
So when they sent us home, they told us that he needed to be put on another medication. They wanted us to put him on gabapentin for like the nerves and muscles, and that would help him to be able to start walking. And they did refer us to do physical therapy, which was local near the school. So he would go to school, and then I would check him out and bring him to physical therapy. But like going through it, it made it worse because they would have him try and stand up. They would touch him, and he was like in a lot of pain all the time. I think we did like 4 sessions of it, and he wasn't really making any progress at all.
Wow.
But I remember driving home the initial, when we left Texas Children the first time. And I didn't, like a mother's intuition, like I just didn't feel like that's what it was. And
So
I remember,
when you drove there, you were so hopeful.
Yeah.
But then you left there just knowing that
And I
something-
remember telling Drew, like, I don't feel like that's not it. And like, he's not, I remember telling Drew, because I had kind of, like, since COVID, I had kind of been down a whole different viewing things. And I just couldn't see us giving him another medication, when they couldn't even tell us if the other medication put him in a wheelchair. And so he ended up, I believe he took like maybe 2 doses of the medicine. And then I completely stopped the medicine. I just didn't have a good feeling about it. And so he went home, like I said. So we got home, he did the physical therapy, and it was like the 3-week mark of when he should be walking again.
And then, so you go back to the hospital?
I'm trying to go back and think of...
Did you go back to the hospital after that?
Yes. So I think we were home for maybe a week or two. Mm-hmm. And he didn't show any improvement at all. It actually got worse. He was having those fits that I call them more often every night. And so...
Still in the wheelchair.
Still in the wheelchair. At this point, he had gained a ton of weight.
Were there any times, for maybe viewers that are watching that are skeptical, were there any times that he would would you find him like walking, for instance, when you weren't looking,
No.
Just because, I mean, maybe some people watching out there are probably thinking, oh, maybe it was in the kid's head, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so you would double, triple check, I'm assuming. As a parent, that's what I would do. If a pediatrician was telling me, hey, it's in his head, well, then I would probably like sneak up on him and see if he was like secretly walking around normal. But did you have any of those episodes?
No. I mean, he basically went to school and got home and he sat in the wheelchair. No, I never...
You never saw improvement?
Nothing. I mean, he would pick up, like at one point, we also had to rent a seat for the bathtub to be able to put him from the wheelchair into our bathtub, because he was getting heavy at that point. And if my husband wasn't home, I couldn't lift him by myself. So we would lift him onto this seat to put him into our tub. And he would take, like, some nights, and I think that's, even now, people, like, in the community will question me, like, so wait, what did he do? Like, how is he walking again? But going through all that, people just thought, oh, he just doesn't want to walk. But they didn't see the things that were going on at home.
Right.
Like, they weren't aware of the fits and the meltdowns. Like, at some points, I was like, is he going crazy? Like, he would just scream.
He was in excruciating pain.
He was in excruciating pain all the time. Mainly, and it's weird, though, it was mainly at night. Like, I don't know if it was the stress level from the day. It was always in the evening. He had excruciating pain. He had a bunk bed at the time, and he had to end up sleeping in our bedroom because we couldn't even get him into his bed. Jeez. And so he would cry for, like in the beginning, he would cry for almost 2 hours every night in pain. And I know because we would pray the rosary with him, the only thing we could touch his legs with was a friend had given us some St. Joseph's oil. So we would pray the St. Joseph's novena and rub oil on his legs every night. And it was normally like we would pray 3 rosaries until he would fall asleep. So that was like an hour and a half, 2 hours every night. And then he never, ever once tried to stand up. Like, I would try to encourage him. Like, when I'd go to take him out the bed, why don't you try to scoot yourself out the bed? He couldn't. He had no strength in his legs at all. He couldn't. We couldn't touch, like, to move him from the bed to the wheelchair, from the wheelchair to the tub. We couldn't. I could barely touch his legs to pick them up at all. He would scream and cry in pain.
So ultimately, the Texas Children's Hospital diagnosed him with a condition?
Yes, it was serum sickness is what they told us.
But then, didn't they diagnose him with AMPS?
Yes. So when we left Texas Children the first time and went home,
they said go home 3 weeks. He's going to get
better.
And
he's going to be fine. He's going to be walking.
And you went back, and he's not walking. He needs some answers.
Yes, we ended up seeing the pediatrician again.
Local?
The same pediatrician, because at that point I couldn't switch doctors. No one wanted to take him
as a pediatrician.
As a patient.
Oh
when I would call to say, like, hey, this is what's going on. No one wanted to see him. So
you got a kid with all these problems and you're stuck in a rut.
We're basically, I did reach out. I have an aunt who was a nurse in a hospital in New Orleans for over 30 years. So I confided in her a lot, and she pretty much gave me a lot of hope. Like, she would kind of lead me in things to look, like, research on my own to try and figure out. But no local doctors really wanted to see him. I even asked his pediatrician, because he was having so much, like, neurological issues at that point. He even called a friend who's a pediatric neurologist local, and he told the pediatrician he could not take his case.
Wow.
Yeah. So at that point, these seizure fits that he was having every evening had gotten really, really bad. And so I begged him, like, can you refer, like, at that point we needed a referral to go back to Texas. So he
you
had a
couldn't just go
friend.
back. You needed a
No,
referral.
because we had already, I believe it's because we had gone and, left. So he did get
But he's
us a
supposed to be
referral.
walking. So when
Yeah,
you go
he's supposed
back,
to be walking.
according to them. So
So
you get
we-
back over to Texas Children's Hospital
And so we saw the head neurologist there, and he, at that point, it was very, like, I remember cringing. At this point, we were admitted to the hospital, and we stayed an entire week. So this is our second time going, and we're there for an entire week because I
tell
told
them how much
them
money you got into this.
a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, a ton of
So
money.
you're there for a week in the hospital, and you're with the chief neurologist there, and
Yes. And he, like, he kept coming in, and I don't know. I don't know if it's like my motherly intuition. I just didn't, I was on edge the whole time because this was also during COVID. So, like, I was watching everything they gave him, everything they did. I questioned every time they took him for a test.
of course.
Like, I was like, almost like the crazy parent,
Yeah, well, at this
checking
point,
everything and
yeah.
documenting, audio recording. Because one doctor would come in, they would tell us something and leave and go collaborate. And then another hour passed, then another group of doctors came in, the kidney specialist. I mean, they said they thought it was rhabdomyolysis again, serum sickness, autoimmune.
So the autoimmune condition they thought was amplified musculoskeletal pain syndrome.
Yes.
For those
At
out there.
first, they thought it was juvenile rheumatoid arthritis because
Okay.
at that point his joints were still swelling everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
They had him on steroids, IV steroids, and he was like very puffy, red all the time, agitated. He wasn't sleeping, which I knew sleep was like very important for him.
Do you ever see any improvement?
Never.
Wow.
They had physical therapists coming the entire week we were there. They would strap this belt around him and pull him up to make him stand, but he was super weak. His legs would just like kind of flop everywhere. He couldn't put his feet flat. They would like do like little physical activities with his legs. He would cry in pain.
Wow.
He was in pain a lot, pretty much.
So
all the
again,
time.
you go through all this. You leave that hospital after a week.
Mm-hmm.
You still don't have any real answers, and you think. I mean, I'm assuming at this point you're like, is he going to have this forever?
Yeah, I was pretty much set on, like, knowing they can't figure it out. I remember the doctors would leave, and I would tell Drew, like, I don't, like, I had lost hope.
Right. Of course. I can't even imagine like where that must have just been the bottom of the barrel for you.
And I think trust too, because it was like they were just in and out, like, oh, well, just try this, we'll put him on this medication for rheumatoid arthritis, and then he'll need this because his thyroid levels are elevated. And at that point I was like, I'm not just gonna keep covering it up with another medication, and like y'all can't even tell me why he's not walking. So I believe the last, I'm trying to think, the last test we did was EMG, I believe, for his muscles, where that was like the worst. I still regret
the needles, where they put needles.
Yeah.
So you couldn't touch him.
No.
Because he had so much pain, but then they did needle testing
Yeah.
where they put needles into the skin, and that must have just,
That was like
he must
horrendous.
have just lost his mind.
It took like 5 nurses plus Drew and I to hold him down.
He must have been screaming.
He screamed the entire time. Yeah, so that was pretty bad. So we left at that point after seeing, so this is the second time we had gone. It was probably between 40 to 60 doctors and medical students from different departments, like the kidney department, the liver, because his liver enzymes were off. Like all of his numbers, his blood work, everything was just like they couldn't, I felt like they couldn't pinpoint what was wrong because there were so many little things off, but they couldn't give me, they just didn't give me any answers. And so they thought he had like a muscle disease.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that point I had requested a full body MRI because I was like, maybe he has like a tumor or something that's causing like paralysis, So that was another thing. After we did the MRI, it showed nothing was wrong, and I was like, this is a huge test. It has to show something.
Yep.
And so when we got those results back, I was grateful.
Yep.
But then I was also so discouraged because I'm like,
Sure.
they still don't have answers for me.
Wow. So let's just go through all. I mean, obviously, my goodness, the pain that your family went through, and then the agony of just watching your child suffer so much and knowing that it's real, with other people maybe not believing it. That compounds everything. So at some point you heard about what we do here at the Nerve Health Institute. How would that be the next progression, or was
Yes.
there other things before that?
So after the second visit, I remember
And this is to Texas
Texas children.
Sorry, yeah.
When we got discharged the second time, we were told he had amplified muscular pain syndrome.
It's amplified musculoskeletal pain
Okay.
syndrome, and for those out there, it's an autoimmune condition that used to be there was only a couple of autoimmune conditions. Now there's over 180 autoimmune conditions named, and basically it's for anybody. It just means dysfunctional cells in the body, cells that are not right. And so, but as far as the answers they gave you to that were still, did they ever say, oh, he's just going to grow out of this? Or he's going to have this for life? He's going to be in a wheelchair for life? Did they, after the second time of going to the best, one of the best pediatric neurological hospitals, they said he'd walk the first time in 3 weeks, and he didn't. So you went back for another week in the hospital. You're there, and you meet with the chief neurologist and everybody, all these doctors, and they give you this diagnosis finally.
Yeah.
But then they say what?
And, it's funny because I'm one who researches everything and like really dig deep into things. And I just, even when we got the second diagnosis, they still couldn't tell me like what did that to him. I'm like, you don't just wake up and not be able to walk. They couldn't give me any background of like what caused that to cause this. And it was just, here's your diagnosis and like, go home.
Yeah.
And so I remember when we got discharged that day, and we were also told it would take months, that he would just slowly be able to start, the pain would go away. He would slowly be able to start standing and moving and continue. At this point, they just kept saying, go back to physical therapy.
And none of it was working.
No. And I kept telling them, he did physical therapy and it made it worse. Like I kept saying that. And I was the one who was with him in therapy. They were not there. And so I just kept saying, after he does physical therapy, the night times are worse. Like when it puts him in more pain, it doesn't help it at all. And so when we left, it was continue gabapentin, which I had already not given it to him, and do the physical therapy. And so after the second diagnosis, I remember we were discharged late in the afternoon. So we ended up staying at a hotel nearby just to kind of rest because he had been through so much. He didn't trust anyone at all that came in the room. He was very we had to bribe him a lot of times, to go and do tests, to have doctors come in. He was terrified. And so we spent the night at a local hospital down the road from the hospital, hotel down the road from the hospital. And I remember driving there telling Drew, it just doesn't sit well with me. I don't feel like this is what it is. I feel like we're going to be back here. And that evening, a friend of a friend called me and told me about your place.
So cool.
Yeah. We had gone through,
What did your friend tell you?
She told me that so it was a friend of mine. Her mom's a hairstylist. And her mom was talking about Avery's story in the hair salon. And
that's where all good things happen in the hair salon, right?
And so she was doing her hair, and the girl in the next chair said, oh my gosh, my son went through the same thing years ago. And his was similar to Avery. I believe he had, maybe it was the flu vaccine, or he had the flu, something with the flu. And he, very similar, didn't walk, I believe, for 3 months or 5 months. Excruciating pain all the time. She went to multiple hospitals, several doctors, local and out of state. And I think he was diagnosed with the same thing, if I'm not mistaken, AMPS. And so I immediately knew that it was like a miracle that that story was told, and she contacted us because I just didn't feel like.
Did she come here too?
Yes, so she
And her son got 100% better?
Yes, I think he walked after, it wasn't very long, but he did the same type of treatment. So it was because of her that we found your place, and, you know, you're only 20 minutes from where we live.
Crazy.
Yeah, so we ended up.
And you had never heard of us before?
Never heard of the Nerve Health Institute.
Wow. And at this point, you have how much money into your son? I mean, there's no telling. It's got to be hundreds of thousands of dollars by the time insurance and copays and all this
and then
stuff.
we missed a lot of work to stay home, and
Right.
you know, he missed a lot of school. We ended up taking him out of school and homeschooling him just from the stress of everything. And so when we drove home that evening, I went onto your website and booked an appointment, submitted, I don't even know the steps to it. It's been a while, but I went through the website, and I believe the next week y'all called me.
I'll never forget.
Yeah.
First day you got him here, and really couldn't get him out of the car.
Yeah.
So I had to go look at him and work on him in the car. And we did that probably for several times because poor little guy, he was so damaged.
He was so
Traumatized, right? He thought we were going to walk into this office and we're going to do needles and we're going to put him in a big scan or draw blood or some of those things, when we're we do the reverse of that. And so from your perspective, because obviously I could get into all the geekiness of what we do here, which is so awesome. We help the body heal itself, which you got this amazing God-made body. It's completely designed to heal itself. And at some point, your 8-year-old just lost the ability to heal and had these progressive conditions that were just progressively getting worse. And you want to think of it, you have 30 trillion cells, and those cells, the more groups of those cells that get unhealthy, they can get a virus. They can get an autoimmune condition. They can get all these different conditions. And it just sounds like in his case, now that we kind of sat down and talked about it, that just condition upon condition upon condition upon condition just kept to the point where he might have died if you'd have kept going, right? I mean, it just, that's how bad this was progressing. So from your standpoint, what did you experience? How did you experience coming here? What was the experience here versus all the other experiences you had? How was it different?
I remember the first.
It's okay. It's okay to get emotional.
I remember.
He's such a cool guy, by the way. I love him so much. He's amazing.
He's a handful. I just remember feeling so much peace.
And the peace came from results. Finally, somebody could understand what he had and then how to fix him.
And just walking in here.
It's okay.
So peaceful, and I just felt heard as a parent.
Somebody finally listened. Somebody finally understood.
And didn't think he was faking.
Yes. From our perspective, we were able to get into his brain. And I want to bring this back up. When you said, I think one of the big tests you thought was going to give you some answers was a full body MRI, right? Where you're going to see the nerves and you're going to see what's not right. Is there a tumor poking on something? Well, they told you that's normal, right? But what an MRI doesn't show you, it doesn't show you the energy flowing from your brain through a nerve into a cell. Because every cell in your body is wired to your brain. Is that wild? Mm-hmm. So what we do here, we were able to figure out where his brain was disconnected to various cell groups, and we methodically, very scientifically started reconnecting his brain and got these cells to get healthier. And it was the most beautiful thing to witness, where you could literally watch his little face start to light up, like he went from being in the car to coming in the office and smiling, and you could see him come back to life, literally. And from my standpoint, was that what you experienced?
Yes, very. I mean, he was like for over 6 months, he was like he wasn't the same kid, you know? So to have him come here and not be in pain, and he trusted you so much, and the nurses, you know,
And
Lily.
he didn't.
At first he didn't.
At first he didn't.
He was very difficult. He had been through so much.
But when we started to get him results,
Yes.
it was
and when
like
he
somebody
felt comfortable, and I think as he came, he felt the healing process, and it's like he had life back into him, and he trusted y'all, and everything that you did to him never hurt him. That was the biggest thing. It was very peaceful, and he was not in he was still in pain in the beginning. Like I remember you could barely touch him when you first started. But as we came through and did all the sessions, people would say, like in the community, even family members would say like, well, what are y'all doing now? That was really hard.
connecting the brain.
Yeah.
Right.
Like what are y'all doing? You're not doing physical therapy anymore. Everything was physical therapy, or people just didn't understand.
Yes.
And for me, it was very clear. Like I felt so much peace when I came into the clinic. I felt like I was heard. It was so much less stressful for us because I was on like pins and needles at every hospital we went to.
The big thing is you just weren't getting results.
Yeah.
But then when you started here, anybody could see the result. Everybody in the community started seeing the results. I will never forget the first time he stood up and walked.
I know. That was a big moment.
It's one of the coolest moments of my life. I mean, I've witnessed it so many times in this amazing practice, but that truthfully, I will never forget it. I will never forget the look on my staff members' faces with him walking out of the office, walking down the hall, the jaws on the floor, and the more important part was his little face.
Yeah.
He was just lit up. Like you could see almost, how could we describe it? Like bars on a Wi-Fi. Mm-hmm. You could see, like when he first started, I don't even think he had a bar on the Wi-Fi, and then you could see 4 bars come back. And
I think too, like coming here, like all the other places we went to, they just focused on he wasn't walking. Mm-hmm. And for me as a mom, it was more than just not walking. And even people in the community didn't understand. Like they just saw, oh, he's in a wheelchair, he can't walk. Yeah. But it was his behavior, his emotions, his sleep, his coloring. Like he stayed red all the time. He stayed puffy and swollen. And it wasn't like once we came here, everything that he did, I saw daily. I mean, I think in the beginning we were coming 3 times a week for 2 hours. Mm-hmm. And people would say, well, how, he's still not walking. And I'm like, but y'all don't see the little bits of progress that, like now he can lift his foot off the floor. He can swing his leg, the little, on the wheelchair. Like he could swing his foot by himself to pick it up. He could swing his leg to get into the bathtub. So cool. It was little steps of progress every day after every session. Mm-hmm. He was sleeping better. He was starting to eat different food. He had stopped eating. Like it wasn't just not walking. So that everything that you've done here, like overall fixed a whole bunch of issues that he was having. It wasn't just not walking, I'm
going to give credit to God in this because I didn't design this amazing body, but it's designed to heal itself. And literally when he first started here, he had no self-healing ability whatsoever. And he was very, very weak and very, very vulnerable and was potentially going to get taken out in any given moment. I mean, that's how bad his case was. And then as we started working, we started connecting the brain to cells and making the brain connect with input, because there's input, there's energy flow from a cell into your brain, and there's output. It's like when you kick your leg out, that's your brain sending energy through a certain nerve into a certain group of muscles to make it work. But if I touch my leg, I should be able to touch and put pressure and all these different things and feel the sense if that energy flows proper to my brain. But if it's not, if I just barely touch, I feel tremendous pain. And that's what he was feeling because those signals were not right, and that doesn't show up on MRIs. You have to have the specialized testing and corrections that we do in the nervous system. And so that was the beauty of watching all these things. We knew exactly what he had. We knew exactly how to get him better. It was just fun. It was just a fun case to watch. But my goodness, the amount of pain you went through. I certainly wish, and hopefully doing things like this educates people, because there's so many other people potentially with conditions that are similar that have undergone hundreds of thousands of dollars in conventional and are lost and think that they're going to have the condition forever. It's permanent. Yeah. It's not going away. So what would be your advice to those people potentially listening to this in the process? Do you think you should have come here first?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, knowing what I know now, because it's, Avery had a lot of sinus issues before. Like, he wasn't necessarily allergic to things, but prior to his sinus surgery, he would just go out and ride the four-wheeler and come in and had trouble breathing or had massive nosebleeds. There were several times where he couldn't breathe, and coming here, like, he hasn't had any of those episodes in a very long time.
So cool.
I mean, while he was sick, at school, he was having 5 nosebleeds a day, constantly sick with sinus issues. He has not taken any medication, like antibiotics, since the time he was on the Bactrim. And we use body chargers. Like, that has been a game changer for us. We all use it in our family.
So for clarity, we have the Nerve Health Institute, which is our clinic, but we also have a company we started called Body Chargers, and it helps people at home. And so we have all these different devices and methods that we use to be able to help. And they're little devices you can literally put in your pocket. I know you have one in your pocket right now, to help recharge the frequency of your cells, which is complicated, but it's really not. Mm-hmm. It's just, you want to think of it as there's a world that people think about, that it's here. And there's a whole nother world that exists. It's almost like the Doctor Strange thing. Mm-hmm. If you watch on TV, there's a movie called Doctor Strange or whatever. And there's a whole nother dimension that exists that people don't know about. And when it comes to the body healing, and we're just in that dimension where we're trying to get the body to heal itself. So it was such a cool progression. One thing I didn't touch on is how long, when you first, I can't remember the date now, I'm thinking about it, maybe you'll remember, but from the moment he got here, his first appointment here was it like January?
February. His first appointment was the end of February.
And then how long before he walked?
He was in a wheelchair for 10 or 12 weeks, and I believe he was here 4 or 5 weeks, and he started walking.
4 to 5 weeks.
Yeah.
And you had gone through all that before. Wow. And he's, just for clarity, for the skeptics maybe watching, he's been running ever since.
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember the first day I believe he did the hyperbarics one day. He was a handful, and he only went in it if I went in the hyperbarics with him. Mm-hmm. And I'm grateful for that y'all allowed me to do that with him. And I believe it was like a day or two after hyperbarics is when he actually started asking to get out the wheelchair. Mm-hmm. And I had been seeing all the little improvements he had been doing. And I remember, like, just having him staying up on his feet was like such a big thing. And then he slowly started walking. I remember when we went to school the next day, and his principal was like everybody was just in awe that, like, he was not, like, just the day before he was in a wheelchair and he's out the wheelchair walking again. So yeah, he's back to doing everything. Driving four-wheelers, hunting, fishing. He's at the hunting camp right now. Yeah, we wanted him to be here today, but he's at the hunting camp right now. Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
Dr. Cormier, I have a question for you.
Sure, yeah.
So when you see this case and you hear everything that has happened, can you walk us through the process of, like, how you went about the reassurance that you could treat Avery? Mm-hmm. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
So we have a method where we examine and the connections with the brain to all the cells. And so there's, like I mentioned earlier, there's input and then there's output. And so we were able to go through, there's 88 major nerves that come off the brain and spinal cord that connect every cell in your body, which is crazy to think about. So we have a method of testing those nerves. And we just, in the beginning, he had so many disconnects.
I think he was at 19%.
It was really bad.
low.
Yeah, it was really bad when we first started. But that process, the way the brain works, is once you start stimulating the connections from the brain to the cells, then they start to get their power supply back. It's like, this is our power company, and it's got to be stimulated and checked. I always tell people that people focus more on checking the teeth all the time, which is great, but your nerves are infinitely more important than your teeth. So you should have somebody checking your nerves. And poor little Avery started out at a young age with a lot of disconnects between his brain. You can imagine just if your brain's not, if the wiring is not connected to your sinuses, well, it makes them vulnerable. You can get repeated sinus infections. Next thing you know, you're blowing out green for 5 years. I mean, and that's part of what was happening with him that just turned into more and more disconnects that led to where he was. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
And I do remember, as we were talking, I remember, so we had gone to Texas Children the beginning of January, and then they said he would have been walking after 3 weeks. Then we had a second visit, and when we got discharged, we had a follow-up 3 weeks after. So it was around like March 1st, I believe.
After you were seeing us?
After I think we were seeing you for like 2 weeks. And so I kept the appointment in Texas Children. I really, to this day, I don't know why. Because I knew when we got here, I felt the peace, and I like everything you did.
Mom's intuition.
I just knew we were in the right place. But I kept the appointment. I don't even know why I kept the appointment in Texas, but we went back for the follow-up, and we met again with the head neurologist there at Texas Children, and at this point he's still in a wheelchair, which we were told again that he was going to be walking. And I said, he's still he walked in and he was like, "How's he doing?" And I said, "Well, he's still in the wheelchair." And it took him a while to even speak to us, because I don't think he knew what to tell us. And I said, I'm just concerned because this is our second go around and he's still in the wheelchair, and what can we do next? He didn't know that we were coming here. And he said, well, after all the tests and reviewing all his charts, and, I think it's probably a nerve issue.
You think?
And I remember looking at, because I had told Drew, my husband, I said, I'm not bringing it up. I want to see what he's going to tell us now. This is our second go around. And I said, oh, okay, well, great. What can you do for us if it's a nerve issue? And he told me there's really nothing we can do at this point.
Wow. And this is one of the best neurologists in the country.
We have no type of treatment to help any nerve issues other than gabapentin. And I said, well, that's not an option for us.
Wow.
And so when we left there, I knew, I just knew we had made the right decision to be here. That was just,
what do you think he would have said if you would talk to him about coming here?
I don't know. I don't know.
What do you think he would say if you went back over to him now and said, hey, I brought him to this, clinic? It might be what people are saying in the community right now.
Yeah.
Oh, he just grew out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think, you know your son better than anybody. Do you think he was going to grow out of what he had?
No.
I mean, he had some massive things going on in his body that were, like I said, from my standpoint, it was at some point going to take him out.
Yeah. I think, it's hard to even think, if we didn't find this place.
Yep.
Because I think about that all the time. Would he still be in a wheelchair?
Or would he still be here?
Yeah.
Would he have gotten a, full-fledged infection that took him out? Yeah.
And I think, too.
And he's such a good dude.
I think, too, because he had, it wasn't just not walking. For a while, he was urinating straight blood.
Wow.
He had a lot of things with his kidney and...
Before coming here.
And you figured out, besides just not being able to walk or touch his legs, you helped pinpoint other things that his body was weak in. He would retain a lot of fluid, his lymphatic system, so many little things that I think if those things weren't targeted also, that I don't know, I think the outcome would be different.
Yes. You have to target all the cells and figure out what groups of the cells are weak and where they're disconnected, and then get them connected again. And so our method here involves oxygen, water, and light. I call it the OWL method. Those are the top ingredients in cells, without getting scientific-y, because that's not what this discussion's about today. But when he came in, we applied what we know and got the brain connected to the cells, got his body functioning, did some oxygen, did some grounding, did some frequency, all the things that we do just to get cells back healthy. And of course, we didn't just do his legs, right? Because remember, the nerves going into your legs, well, they go to your kidneys. They go to the descending colon, all the different parts of the body, right? They're all connected. And you got to know which one's connected and how it's connected and how to restore it. And so it was just such a joy to work with him. And I'm so happy that you had faith in us and you got to see this amazing miracle with your child. I mean, would you describe this as miraculous?
Oh, definitely.
Would it be one of the greatest miracles you ever witnessed?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Even now, like...
People tell you that in the community?
Yeah. I mean, I've had so many messages and phone calls, and I even met with this older guy for coffee when they, you know, like people in the community didn't, like a lot of people didn't,
they don't know the story.
They just didn't understand it, I think.
They didn't know the story.
Yeah.
Honestly, today, I'm so happy we did this because today I don't have my doctor hat on. I'm more of a dad, and I'm trying to see what you went through. And I can't, now I even understand it better now. I'm so happy we had the talk, and I'm sorry some of this is painful for you, but I think it's closure.
Yeah, it is.
For you. Because I think there's also something in the back of your mind that maybe, is this going to happen again?
Yeah, I think even after he started walking and
wait, let's clarify. When did he start walking? How long ago was that?
So he stopped walking January 8th of 2023.
Okay.
And he started walking
was it March?
March 17th about.
Of 2023.
23, yeah.
And he's been walking and running since then.
Yeah.
And right now, the date of this interview, we're January 2nd, 2026. Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
Yeah. And he's never, like a couple of times after walking when he would get sick, like we would come here and you're the only doctor he's ever come to. He will not go to any other doctor.
Wow.
He just, and I think too, like he trusts you and he loves it here, but he also knows how good he feels after he comes for his sessions, you know? Results. Because even like the days that he did the red light contour or the Curatron, like he was a completely different kid those days. Like he just felt so much better, and we slowly started seeing progress after every session that we had. And we still come. I mean, he's had flu twice, and he's never taken any medication. He's coming. Amazing. He was fine the next day.
Amazing. Your family's such good patients, and where a lot of the things we offer to you, you take in like a sponge, and you listen to us, and you do. So it makes my job really easy. When we give you advice and you follow it and keep your kids healthy. I mean, that's the whole mission, is to try to keep your family as healthy as possible. Yeah. And when a family member like that is, especially it's your child, just I can't even imagine, like I said, what you went through. But I'm so happy for him. Is your skepticism that this potentially can happen again, is that gone?
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's
in
awesome.
The beginning, I always had this like uneasy feeling, just because I just didn't feel like what I was being told was right.
Yeah.
But once I started seeing the healing and he was back to the kid he used to be. Yep. I don't think it would ever happen again.
I've gotten to know him, over the last couple of years, and I mean, he's just driving tractors, and I mean, how old is he? He's 10.
He just turned 11.
At 11, so he's 11 years old. I mean, he's driving like major trucks and tractors, and I mean, so he would have missed all of that. Where and you could see the excitement in his eyes, with talking about vehicles and hunting and fishing.
And I think that's hard to like put into words too, because some days I'm like, I just feel like if we wouldn't have found your place,
Yep.
you know? So I'm grateful.
I'm so grateful too. And that's why we're doing this, so that we can tell people the story better of all of this, so that other people in the area, other people around don't have to go through what you had to go through. If they just come directly here, we can make things so much better, so much faster, without enduring all the pain and all the things that you went through. Plus the money of it all.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Hailey, for telling your story on your beautiful child. And I'm so happy for him. And people on the other side of the screen out there, if anybody out there is listening, and you have any type of condition, whether you're an adult or child, just know that there is help that we can give to you, that other doctors don't know what we're doing, but yet we do know what we're doing. And it's all about self-healing the body. So thanks so much for being here. So
Thank you.
yes. Real quick, if you are a viewer out there and you have a condition similar to this, whether you're an adult or child, just know that we have resources that you can click on that are down below here that you can see. And if you have any questions, just put them in the comments. We genuinely want to help you and your family, your loved ones, no matter what part of the health path that you're on. We just want to offer you the best care in the world when it comes to getting your body to heal itself. I'm Dr. Chris Cormier, and I'd love to see you on our next episode.